It is a good thing that people look at institutions hollowed out by the left wing with radical skepticism and look to build new institutions. However, if the substitute for this is an atomized society in which you go to TikTok for your information, you're going to end up with some pretty bad information. The Democratic Party is now turning to younger cadres, but the problem is that all the young socialists are also people who are spoiled brats. Okay, typically, they are spoiled brats. The best example being this amazing article from the New York Post. Apparently, socialist New York City mayoral frontrunner Zoran Mamdani celebrated his recent nuptials with a lavish 3-day affair at his family's ritzy, secluded Ugandan compound, complete with masked security guards and a cell phone jamming system, according to the New York Post. The gates of the bustling private compound, which sits in the wealthy Buziga Hill area outside the capital city of Kampala, were heavily guarded by military-style masked men this week, with guests streaming in and partying until midnight, according to sources in the town who wished to remain anonymous for security reasons. Mamdani had eloped with artist and animator Rama Duaji, 27, in February. He told his social media followers Sunday he was headed to his homeland to celebrate with his wealthy filmmaker mom and professor dad who own that Buziga Hill property. Apparently, the neighborhood is home to some of Uganda's richest, including billionaire businessman Godfrey Kirumira, a city tycoon with stakes in real estate, tourism, petroleum, and infrastructure, and houses the neighboring Mamdani's easily fetch more than $1 million, which in Uganda, by the way, is like a lot of money. A $1 million home in the United States, can be like a mid-sized home depending on where you are. It could be a huge home depending on where you are. In Uganda, I promise you, that's going to be a really, really nice house because the GDP per capita in Uganda is precisely $1,000 per capita. So $1 million will buy you half the country. I love you want to talk about limousine socialists? That is what you're looking at right now. Okay, so the Democratic Party is on the ropes. They are on the ropes, but there is an increasing danger. And that danger comes in the form of a splintering that is happening on the right. So part of the problem with the destruction of the institutions by the left is that there are, in fact, no replacements for the institutions. So there has been a split on the right between what Alana Newhouse, a tablet, has called the brokenness, people who believe the institutions need to be completely torn down, ripped to the ground, new institutions built, and people who believe the institutions are fixable. The area where the right generally agreed, however, is that institutions are necessary. One of the problems with the death of the legacy media, and believe me, I'm a big fan of the death of the legacy media since we run a major media company here at Daily Wire. And one of the things that's happened is that with distrust in institutions, justified, earned distrust in the institutions, that has been replaced by a variety of sources, some which are good and some which are bad. And unless people are trained in how to actually distinguish good sources from bad sources, they tend to intake an enormous amount of trash. And that's what's happened with younger Americans. So while I am quite optimistic about the future of the Republican Party, I am quite pessimistic about the nature of the quote-unquote younger generation. We'll get to more on this in just one second. First, who knows you better than yourself, your family, or your friends? Well, the answer is actually a bunch of companies. If you own any internet-connected devices, there are thousands of companies that might know you better than you actually know yourself. They're called data brokers. They make billions of dollars tracking everything you do online, every purchase, every location, every conversation, your most personal beliefs, all packaged into a profile they sell to marketers, activists, and yes, politicians looking to influence you. You could go completely off the grid, or you could just use ExpressVPN. These companies track you through your IP address, your digital fingerprint. ExpressVPN gives you a new IP address and a location you choose, making you virtually untraceable. With ExpressVPN, your connection is encrypted and routed through secure servers. Even your internet provider can't see your activity, which is important since they're legally allowed to sell your data to whomever they want. I use ExpressVPN all the time. As you've noticed, I've been on the road a lot, and that means that I'm using public Wi-Fi at airports and such. Well, I don't see why it's anybody else's business what I do with my data. ExpressVPN works on all your devices, phones, laptops, tablets, with just one click for instant privacy. Find out how you can get 4 months free by scanning that QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or by heading on over to expressvpn.com/Ben Shapiro Show. There's a very interesting article by a guy named John Puri over at National Review. He's a summer editorial intern at National Review. He's a young guy himself. He studies politics and history at Stanford. And he goes through some of the poll numbers about Gen Z. He says, there's an odd thing that many older liberals tend to say about America's youth. As a member of Generation Z, which currently comprises those aged 13 to 28, I've often heard a similar refrain. It's you young people who are going to save this country. Some older liberals say such things because they seem to truly believe that young Americans are an especially enlightened demographic, that we, purely by dint of our youth, have a better understanding of the world than does everyone else. Sometimes this assumption is translated into policy. He points out the UK saying that 16-year-olds should vote. However, he says, One small problem. Gen Z does not have some superior moral authority. We do not understand the world better than everyone else. Our political beliefs are not especially enlightened. Quite the opposite, in fact. The polling data reflect that we are largely morally and factually bankrupt. So, for example, he cites the moral perception of the recent war between Israel and Hamas. Apparently, according to an April 2024 Pew Research poll, Americans were asked whether Hamas's reasons for fighting Israel were valid. An overwhelming majority of Americans said no. But for those aged 18 to 29, 34% said Hamas's reasons were valid compared to 30% who thought otherwise. That age group was also the most likely to say that the way Hamas carried out its attack against Israel on October 7th, a giant terror attack, the worst attack on Jews since World War II, they said 9% said that it was valid, double the number of any other age group. A Harvard-Harris field survey after October 7th found similar results. Those 18 to 24 concluded by a majority, 51 to 49, that Hamas's massacre, quote, can be justified by the grievances of Palestinians. And it's not just that. When it comes to, for example, the killing of Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, a poll of college students, Axios reported in January, found that half view the suspect extremely or somewhat favorably. Asked with whom they sympathized more, Mangione, the killer, or Brian Thompson, the victim, 45% said Mangione, 17% said Thompson. Nearly a quarter of Americans aged 18 to 24 say they trust Russian President Vladimir Putin over Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. That is the highest number by far in the age group. 52% of U.S. college students say it may be acceptable to block other students from attending a speech on campus. 68% approve of shouting down a speaker they disagree with. 32% say using violence is appropriate. Apparently, The Economist did a poll last year, and it found that 1 in 5 Americans aged 18 to 29 believe the Holocaust is a myth, and another 30% say they do not know whether the Holocaust is a myth, meaning like half of young Americans 18 to 29 either don't know whether the Holocaust is a myth or believe it is a myth. 28% said Jews wield too much power in America. Now, the question is, where is all this coming from? And the answer is, a lot of this is coming from crap social media accounts. It's coming from TikTok. It's coming from X. A huge amount of news that is intaken by young people is not coming from anything that looks like a vetted source or a source that actually cares about reality or veracity. In fact, 63% of Generation Z, quote, does not believe in moral absolutes, but thinks what is morally right or wrong depends on what an individual believes. So what is right changes over time based on society. Only 34% of Generation Z believe lying is morally wrong, which is lower than any other generation. Now, why do I point this out? Because if you want to know why conspiratorialism has soared, again, there are good reasons to distrust all these institutions. It is a good thing that people look at institutions hollowed out by the left wing with radical skepticism and look to build new institutions or restore those institutions by kicking the left out of those institutions and actually regaining credibility. However, if the substitute for this is an atomized society in which you go to TikTok for your information or X.com for your information, you're going to end up with some pretty bad information. And this is why conspiratorialism has soared on every side of the political aisle, and that is dangerous because conspiratorial nonsense, again, there are conspiracies. We've talked about many of them. Russiagate was an actual conspiracy. The media attempting to shut down the Hunter Biden laptop story, actual conspiracy. Like, these are things that actually happened in real life. The thing about conspiracies that are real, as I've said 1,000 times on the show, is there is evidence of them. You can name the people involved. Conspiratorial thinking, however, speculates that there is an unnamed group of people who you can't put a finger on, but you know they're there, and behind closed doors, they must be doing something nefarious and terrible, and therefore you are not in control of your own life, and you get to be very angry at someone. Right? That sort of thinking is not good for society. It's not good politically. It's not good at all. It is bad for you as a human to engage in that sort of thinking because it means that you are essentially saying that you are not in control of your own future. You're not in control of your own life, and there's no prospect that you will be because the shadowy forces control everything. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.